I did not understand it, and that was the part I could not forgive. I had ridden the muster line at first light, the way an alpha king must down the whole shivering row of them, the sons and the sworn men the border vales had sent me, boys with their fathers' spears and old wolves with gray in their muzzles, all of them come to die for Ashmore if I asked it. I had looked into 1,000 faces that winter and felt nothing but the cold arithmetic of a king at war. This one would hold, that one would break, that one would not see the spring. It was a hard way to see men. It kept them alive. It kept me able to send them where they had to go. Then I came to the new one from Grenell Vale, and my wolf leaned. That is the only word I have for it, even now. He leaned the way a hound leans toward a hearth it has not seen in years, the way a starved thing leans toward bread. There was a soldier standing in the frozen mud with a spear too heavy for those thin wrists and a hood pulled low against the wind, and something under my breastbone reached out toward him like a hand in the dark. A warmth I had no name for and no right to. I reined my horse in without meaning to. I sat there a heartbeat too long, staring down at a boy I had never seen, while my whole war watched their king forget himself. Name, I said, harder than I meant because I was angry at the warmth. Kell my king, a low voice rough kept down in the throat, son of Haver of Grenell. Haver, I knew the name the way a king knows the worst of his own debts. Haver had bled for my father in the last Scarn war, taken a spear through the hip that never healed clean, come home half a wolf and wholly a hero. And now Haver was too broken to answer his own muster, and had sent this reed of a boy, this child with a spear he could barely lift. Your father should not have sent you, I said. You'll die in a week. The hood came up a fraction. I caught the edge of a jaw, a mouth set hard, eyes the color of a river under ice, and the warmth under my ribs flared so sharp it was nearly pain, and I hated it, and I did not know why. Then I'll die a week's worth of use to you first, my king, the boy said. Down the line, someone laughed. I did not. I looked at that thin, cold, stubborn face, and I felt my wolf press against the inside of my skin like it wanted out, like it wanted to go to him, and I thought, something is wrong with me. A king does not lean toward his soldiers. A mated wolf leans toward his mate. A hungry wolf leans toward the kill. A broken wolf leans toward nothing at all. I was none of those. I had no mate. I had refused every match my council had ever set before me, refused the daughters of every allied pack, because none of them had ever made my wolf so much as lift its head, and I had made a hard peace with that, the way you make peace with a bad leg. A king could rule without a Luna. I had told myself so for years. And now my wolf had lifted its head, for a shivering boy in the mud. And I rode on down the line with my jaw locked, and my heart going like a war drum, and I told myself it was the cold. We marched north within the week. The Scarn had come down over the iron line again, the raider packs of the frozen country beyond, wolves who ran too far and too feral to answer any king, who came south every hard winter to burn the border vales and take what the burning left. My father had held them at the line his whole reign. I meant to break them past it once and for all, so that no more Havers came home half-men, and no more villages sent their last thin sons to die. It was a good war, as wars go. That is to say, it was necessary, and it would kill a great many people I was sworn to keep alive. I did not intend to think about the boy from Grenell again. I intended to think about supply lines and the depth of the snow, and whether the Scarn would give me the open battle I needed or bleed me 100 men at a time in the passes. I intended a great many sensible things. Instead, I found my eyes going to him across the war camp every night, the way a tongue goes to a broken tooth. He was careful. That was the first thing I noticed and could not stop noticing. He never washed with the others at the river. He never stripped to the waist by the fires the way the young ones did, showing off winter-pale muscle and old scars, boasting. He kept his hood up, kept apart, ate quick and quiet at the edge of the light, and slept curled small at the very rim of the camp where the pickets stood. The men took him for shy or proud or soft, and some of them meant to make him pay for it. I saw that too, saw the way the big ones eyed him, and something in me went to iron at the sight. A cold protectiveness that had no business in a king's chest for one soldier among thousands. The second thing I noticed was that the boy could fight. Not with strength, he had none to spare, that reed-thin frame, but with a patience and a low cunning that the strong ones never learned because they never had to. In the first true skirmish, a Scarn scouting pack that fell on our four-riders in a birch wood, I watched Kell of Grenell do a thing I had seen perhaps 3 men do in 20 years of war. He stepped back. When the raider came at him howling with all that feral weight, Kell gave ground 1 step, 2, let the wolf overreach itself in the snow, and put his spear where the beast's own charge carried it. The scarn died on a thin boy's patience, and Kell stood over it breathing hard, shaking, and then was quietly sick behind a tree where he thought no one could see, and then wiped his mouth and picked up his spear and went back to the line. I had made hard soldiers of stronger men who did far less. I said nothing. But that night my wolf would not settle, and I walked the camp when I should have slept, and I found myself standing at the edge of the pickets looking down at a small shape curled under a thin blanket at the rim of the firelight, and the warmth in my chest ached like a bruise you keep pressing to see if it still hurts. It still hurt. I made him a runner first, then a picket captain over a dozen men then, when he had earned it a dozen times over that long, killing winter, I made him one of my own guard. I told my war master it was because the boy was clever and steady, and the guard needed cleverness more than muscle. That was true. It was not why. I did it because I could not stop wanting him near, and I was a king, and I could bend the whole world to put him near without ever saying the shameful thing to myself. That I did not understand what I felt, only that when Kell of Grenell was within reach of my voice, the terrible cold loneliness I had carried since before I was crowned went quiet, and when he was gone it came back like a tide. My war master did not like it. Osric had served my father and served me and had blood enough and scars enough to say what he pleased. He was not a cruel man. He was a suspicious one, which in a war master is close to a virtue, and he did not trust what he could not weigh. He came to me one gray morning in the deep of that winter with his face set. "The Grenell boy," he said. "What of him?" "Something's wrong with him." Osric was not a man to soften things. "He hides. He won't bathe with the men. He won't wrestle, won't drink, won't answer a plain question about his own kin. Cale's brother knew Haver of Grenell and swears the man had no son, only a daughter and a dead wife, and that the girl kept the whole hold running while the old man rotted. No son, my king, yet here's a son." The warmth in my chest went very still. "Cale's brother is mistaken," I said. "Maybe," Osric watched me too closely. "Or maybe the Vale's hiding something under your roof, and I don't like a hidden thing in the middle of my war. A spy wears a shy boy's face as well as any. I want to have it looked into. I want him watched. And if it comes to it, I want him stripped and searched before he sleeps another night in your guard, my king. And I don't care whose feelings it." "No." It came out of me before I had thought it, flat and hard and final, an alpha's word with the whole weight of the throne behind it, and Osric rocked back on his heels and stared at me. I had never in 10 years overruled him on the safety of my own person. I heard how it sounded. I saw the question form behind his eyes. Why does the king protect this one boy so, when he's guarded nothing of himself in a decade? And I had no answer I could give him, because I had no answer I could give myself. "He's proven himself 20 times over," I said, more level. "He's saved men of mine. I'll not have him shamed on Cale's brother's gossip. Watch him if you must. Lay one hand on him without my word and answer to me. Are we clear, War Master?" "Clear," Osric said, but he did not stop watching. And I knew the way a king learns to know these things that I had just told him, more plainly than any confession, that whatever the Grenell boy was, his king would burn the law to keep him. I had made it worse. I had made Kell more dangerous to himself, not less. And still I could not make myself do the sensible thing and let Osric strip the secret bare, because some animal certainty in me knew that whatever was under that hood, it was mine to protect, and I would sooner have cut off my own hand than see it exposed. That was the winter I stopped sleeping. I told myself it was the war. And the war was real enough. We ground North Pass by Frozen Pass, buying every mile in men, the Scarn falling back to their high strongholds and bleeding us the whole way. I lost soldiers I'd known since I was a pup. I sent men to die because a king must, and hated the arithmetic of it more each week. But under the war always was the other thing. The boy at my shoulder in the war tent, leaning over the maps with his hood down for once, and the firelight on that hard, fine, cold-chapped face. The way he'd catch my eye across a plan and understand the whole of my thought before I'd finished it. The low, rough voice that had learned, over the months, to argue with me, quietly, cleverly, only ever when he was right. No man had argued with me and been right so often since my father died. I had forgotten what it was to be understood. I had forgotten if I'd ever known, and now I could not unremember it, and it was ruining me. One night in the deep dark I said, low, not meaning to, "Why do you hide from me, Kell?" He went still across the map. The fire snapped between us. "I don't hide from my king," he said. "You hide from everyone. I did not look up from the parchment. I could not have said it to his face. You've been at my shoulder half a year and I don't know you. Every other man in this camp I could tell you his mother's name and the girl he means to marry and how he takes his ale. You I know only by what you do, which is more than any of them, and never by what you are. I made myself stop. Are you a spy, Kell of Grenell? No, my king, no hesitation. And under the rough-throated voice, for just a moment, something else, something that made the warmth in my chest turn over and ache. I swear it on my father's scars. I'm no enemy to you. I never could be. Then what are you, I said, that you fear the light so? A long silence, the fire, the wind off the passes worrying at the tent. Someone who couldn't come to you any other way, he said at last, very quiet, and couldn't stay away. And then he gathered up the maps too quickly and bowed too low, and was gone into the dark before I could ask him what in all the cold world he meant. And I sat alone with the guttering fire and my hammering heart, and did not sleep at all. The Scarn gave me my battle at the thaw. They had to. We'd pushed them back to the hollow, the last great stronghold below the iron line, a ring of black stone and older wolves, the place my father had never been able to break. If they lost it, they lost the border for a generation. So they came out to meet us on the open snowfield before it, every feral pack of them, more than I'd feared, a gray tide howling under a white sky. It was the battle I'd wanted and dreaded for a year. It was the battle that would end it. I put my best around me and my worst on the flanks, and Kell of Grenell at my right hand where I could see him. And I told myself it was because he was steady, and I knew by then that I was lying. I will not tell all of that day. A king remembers battles the way you remember a fall from a great height, in pieces, out of order, too bright. I remember the first shock of the lines meeting like two rivers in flood. I remember the snow going red and then black. I remember Osric holding the center like a rock in a sea, and Doran, a broad, laughing boy from the eastern holds who had made himself Kell's one friend, who called him Little Wolf and shared his ration and never once asked what he hid. I remember Doran going down under three of them and Kell wading in to drag him out, thin arms and all, spear work like a needle, saving a man twice his size because that was simply what Kell did. And I remember the moment the battle tried to kill me. Their alpha found me. Of course he did, kill the king and the war dies with him. Every raider on that field wanted my throat. He was a monster of a wolf, old and huge and mad with the fury of a losing thing, and he broke through my guard in a place the line had thinned and came at me while my sword was buried in another, and I knew with the strange calm that comes at the very end that he had me, that I would not turn in time, that the arithmetic had finally come round to its king. Then Kell was there. I did not see how. One moment there was death coming down at me, and the next there was a thin body flung across its path, a spear driving up under the monster's jaw with the whole small weight behind it, and the Scarn Alpha's claws, already falling, tearing down instead through leather and mail, and the shoulder and side of the soldier who had put himself where his king was meant to die. I killed the beast. I do not remember doing it. I remember only turning with a sound in my throat I had never made in my life, a raw, broken thing, and cutting the Scarn Alpha nearly in two before he'd finished falling. And then the field was breaking around us, their king dead, ours living, the gray tide turning to rout, and none of it mattered. None of the war I'd spent a year and 1,000 men to win, because Kell of Grenell was down in the red snow at my feet and not moving. Kell, I was on my knees. A king does not kneel in the middle of a battle. I did not know I had done it until I was there, hands going to that torn shoulder, that ruined side. Kell, no, look at me, you stubborn, look at me. The eyes opened, river ice under a white sky, fixed on my face. Told you, a thread of a voice, the mouth trying to smile. A week's worth of use. You've a whole life's worth of use, you fool, you'll not Doran. D-O-R-A-N, to me. And I was pulling at the ruined mail to see the wound, to press it, to hold the boy's blood inside him with my own 2 hands, tearing at the buckles of the leather he had never once in a year let anyone touch. And the leather came away, and the bound linen beneath it came away with it, torn through by the same claws, and I stopped. The world stopped, because the soldier bleeding in my arms was not a boy at all. I knelt in the red snow with the truth naked in my hands, and I could not move and I could not breathe. Under the ruined mail, under the year of leather and grime and careful hiding, was a woman, slight and torn and gray with pain and entirely, unmistakably a woman, and in the instant I understood it, in the instant the last careful year of secrets fell away, my wolf came up out of the deep of me with a force that nearly blinded me, and every strange, shameful, nameless thing I had felt for a year turned over in one great wave and became the only thing it had ever been. Mate, the bond hit me like the sea hits a cliff. Not gently. It did not steal in. It broke over me all at once, and I understood with my whole body, with a certainty older than my crown, that I had not been sick, had not been broken, had not been shaming myself for a year over a soldier. My wolf had leaned toward her in the mud at Grenell because she was mine. It had ached across every camp for a year because she was mine. The cold loneliness I had carried my whole life had gone quiet in her presence because she was the answer to it. The mate I had refused 100 matches waiting for without knowing I waited. And she had been at my right hand the whole time, bleeding out her secret one careful day at a time, close enough to touch and hiding for her life. You, I said, it came out wrecked. It was you, all this, it was you. Torin, my name, she had never once used my name. It came out of her on a broken breath and it undid me. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you. If you'd known, they'd have sent me home, and my father would have died in the pass, and I couldn't let him. Her hand rose, shaking, and touched my jaw, leaving red on it, and her ice-pale eyes were full at last, all the year's hardness gone. I only meant to take his place. I never meant to, I didn't know you'd that. Don't. I had her against me now, my cloak already off my own shoulders and around her, pressing the wound, roaring for the healers over my shoulder without ever taking my eyes from her face. Don't you dare finish that where it ends in dying. You've hidden a whole year. You can hide a while longer, hide inside your own skin and stay in it. Do you hear me? Stay. That is your king's command, and my voice cracked clean through. And your mates, and you have never once disobeyed me when I was right, so you'll not start now. Something moved through her face, wonder and terror, and under both of them a wild, exhausted joy, as if the one thing she had never let herself hope for had come and found her in the snow. Mate, she breathed, testing it, believing it. You feel it too. It wasn't only me. It was never only you, I said, and I gathered her up out of the red snow, the whole of her, so much lighter than a year of watching had let me guess, this woman who had out-soldiered my army, and I carried her off that broken field in my own arms in full view of my whole living war, and I did not care who saw their king weep over the soldier called Kell. Let them see. Let all of Ashmore see. I had found the thing I'd stopped believing in, and she was bleeding, and nothing else in the wide, cold world was real. She did not die. I want that said plainly, because for 3 days I was not sure of it, and those 3 days took more out of me than the whole year of war. The healers worked over her in my own tent, and I would not leave it, and my counsel came and went with the business of a finished war. The hollow taken, the scarn broken, the border safe for a generation. Exactly what I'd spent everything to win, and I signed what they put in front of me without reading it and watched her breathe. On the 3rd night the fever broke and her ice-pale eyes opened clear, and found me sitting where I had sat for 3 days, and she said in her own voice at last, a woman's voice, low and warm and wrung out, "You look terrible, my king." "You look alive," I said, "so I'll allow you the insolence," and I put my face down against her hand, and I did not lift it for a long while. Her name was Senna. I made her tell me all of it. The veil, the old scarred father who'd raised her alone and taught her the spear because he'd had no son to teach, the muster falling and have her too broken to answer and no coin to buy a man to go in his place. How she'd cut her hair by the fire the night before the levee while her father slept, and taken his arms, and walked out into the dark to die in his stead, so that the one person left who loved her would not have to. She told it plainly, without asking for anything, the way she'd done everything for a year, and I understood, listening, that she had never once in all of it been trying to become anything. She had only been trying to keep an old man alive. That she had become the bravest blade in my army along the way was simply what she was, the way water is wet. I had crowned kings and knighted heroes. I had never in my life met anyone half so worth the keeping. But there was the law. I will not pretend there was not. Osric brought it to me himself. The morning she could sit up brought it stiff and troubled, because he was an honest man and honesty cut both ways in him. The muster law was old and hard. It was the sworn men and the sons who owed the levy, a woman under arms in the king's own guard, undeclared, a year of the whole camp deceived. The softest name for it was fraud against the crown, and there were harder names, and there were men on my council who would want them used. A precedent, they'd say. A hole in the levee that every reluctant house would crawl through if the king let one woman's cleverness stand. Osric laid it before me plainly, and then, having laid it, stood there with his jaw working, and at last said the thing that cost him. She pulled me off that field with her own hands, my king, and she put herself where the beast meant to open your throat. I hunted her secret all winter. I'd have stripped her before the men and shamed her if you'd let me." He looked, for the first time in the years I'd known him, ashamed. "I was wrong about what she was. I was not wrong that she was hiding it. Both are true. I don't know how a king answers that. I only know I don't want to be the man who broke her for it." "Then you won't be," I said, "because I will answer it. In front of all of them. Have the whole camp brought to the field at midday, War Master. Every man of Ashmore who lived. She'll not be judged in a tent behind my back like a thing to be ashamed of. If they mean to reckon with her, they'll do it in the open, where they can also reckon with what she did on that field. And so will I." She fought me on it, of course. She was on her feet before the healers, loud and gray with the effort, and she caught my arm and said, low and fierce, "Let me go home, Torin, quietly. Don't stand me up in front of them. Don't make them choose between their king and their law over one border girl who lied to them. I'm not worth splitting your camp." "Stop," I took her face in both my hands. She had grown her hair not at all in 3 days, still shorn short as any soldier's, and I had never seen anything I wanted to keep so badly. "Hear me. For a year you decided everything for everyone. You decided your father would live. You decided your king would not die on that field. You decided alone in the dark, carrying it all yourself so no one else had to. It ends today. Today I decide something, and it is this. You are done hiding, and you will never again be a thing anyone gets to be ashamed of, least of all yourself. Now let your king do the one brave thing you'll allow him. Let me stand up in front of my whole war and tell them the truth." And she looked at me a long moment, that woman who had never once let anyone carry a single thing for her, and something in her, some brace she'd held her whole life, eased. She let go. She let me carry it. It was, I think, the hardest and the bravest thing I ever saw her do. So at midday I stood her on the field before the hollow where the war had ended, before every living soldier of Ashmore, and I did not dress it up. I told them who she was. I told them the name Grenell Vale had sent me, and the name she was born to, and the old man she'd ridden out to save, and the year she'd stood at their shoulder and pulled them out of the snow and asked nothing. I told them she'd put her own body between their king and death. And then I told them what the law said, plainly, so no man could say his king had hidden it, and I let that hang in the cold air, and I watched 1,000 faces the way I'd watched them a year ago in the mud, weighing which would hold and which would break. And then Doran, broad, laughing Doran, whom she'd hauled bleeding out of the gray tide, stepped out of the ranks without leave, went down on one knee in the snow before her and put his fist to his heart. And beside him another knelt. And then it went through the whole field like wind through wheat. The men she'd fought beside, the pickets she'd captained, the wounded she'd dragged clear, going down one after another into the red-stained snow. 1,000 soldiers of Ashmore kneeling to the woman they'd called Little Wolf, until the only 2 people left standing on that whole broken field were their king and the soldier called Kell. Osric knelt last and slowest, being proud, being old, being honest to the end. But he knelt. "There is your reckoning," I said to her, quiet for her alone, though my voice carried the way an alpha's carries when he wills it. "There is the law of Ashmore. 1,000 men who owe you their lives on their knees in the snow. Let any council in my kingdom argue with that." She was weeping. She who had not wept through a year of war, who had been quietly sick behind a birch tree and wiped her mouth and gone back to the line. She stood in the middle of a kneeling army with the tears running down that hard, fine face, and she did not try to hide it, and that undid me more than anything she'd ever done. I did not make her Luna that day with a crown and a right. That came later in the spring, in the great hall of Ashmore with her old father brought up from Grenell to see it, Haver, weeping too, the proudest broken man in the north. What I did on the field was simpler, and I think it mattered more. I took off my own cloak again, the king's cloak, the gray and silver of Ashmore, and I put it around her shorn head and torn shoulders, there in the snow in front of them all, and I took her cold hand in both of mine. "Refused 100 matches," I said low, only half for her. "My council thought their king had no heart to give. They were wrong. I had one. I was only waiting for it to walk into my muster line half frozen and lie to my face for a year to save an old man's life." I brought her hand up, pressed my mouth to her scarred knuckles, the ones that had put a spear through the thing that meant to kill me. "There's no worth I ever looked for in a Luna that you haven't already outrun in the field, Senna of Grenell. I don't want a woman brought to my hall in silk. I want the bravest soldier I ever commanded. I want the one my wolf leaned toward before I even knew her face. Stay, not in your skin this time, in my life. Stay, and let me be the thing you don't have to carry alone." I never wanted to be carried, she said, unsteady, half a laugh in it. I know, I said. That's why I'll never make you. I only want to walk beside you. You've walked at my right hand a year already. Walk there without the disguise. And she turned her hand in mine so that her fingers laced through my fingers, a soldier's grip, hard and sure and entirely her own, and she said, There, that's my answer. That's the only vow I know how to make, and it was worth more to me than any words a priest could have said in her mouth. We are old now, she and I, or old enough. The border has stayed shut a generation, as I swore it would. The scarn are a story mothers tell in Grenell to fright the young, and no more thin last sons ride out to die in the passes, because their Luna made a law her first year in the hall that no hearth need send anyone at all who could not be spared, and that any who went, of any kind, went as free soldiers of Ashmore and were honored so. My council fought her on it. She was right, of course. She usually is. I stopped arguing with that years ago. She never grew her hair long. It surprised the court in the early days. They'd expected the shorn soldier to bloom into some silkan jewel's Luna once she was safe, and she simply did not. She keeps it short still, going gray now at the temples, and she wears the gray and silver of Ashmore cut close and plain. And twice a week she goes down to the yard and spars with the young ones who think a Luna past her prime cannot possibly land a blow. And twice a week she teaches them different, laughing, while I stand at the rail and watch and remember a thin boy giving ground in the snow. Sometimes she catches me watching, across the yard or the hall or the years, the way she used to catch my eye across a war map. She still understands the whole of my thought before I've finished it. And when she does, some nights, she comes and takes my hand in that hard, sure soldier's grip, and neither of us says anything, because there is nothing that needs saying that we did not already say in a red field a lifetime ago. But once, only once, on the anniversary of that battle, both of us gray by then and quiet by the fire, she turned my scarred hand over in her scarred hands and pressed her mouth to the knuckles the way I'd once pressed mine to hers, and she said, You knew before I told you. On the field, before you saw, your wolf leaned. It leaned in the mud at Grenell, I said, the first hour I ever looked at you. I only spent a year too proud and too blind to know a mate from a mistake. I turned my hand to hold hers. You were never once a soldier I imagined into a woman, Senna. You were the mate I'd stopped waiting for, walking into my life the only door you had. I didn't recognize the bond. That was my failing. The bond never once failed to recognize you. She smiled at that, the small, hard, warming smile I'd first caught the edge of under a hood in the mud, that took 30 years to fully belong to me. Good, she said. Then we're square, because I couldn't come to you any other way and I couldn't stay away. The same words, from the war tent. She had carried them 30 years to give back to me by the fire, and I had carried them 30 years without knowing I was owed them. It is a strange thing, to have spent a year of your life aching toward someone you were forbidden by your own blindness to name, and then to spend the rest of it beside her at the rail, watching her teach the young the thing she taught me, that the strong ones win by strength and lose by it too, and that the ones who last are the ones who learn to give a single step of ground in the snow and wait, and put the spear where the world's own weight carries it. She gave me one step of ground that first hour. I have spent my whole long reign trying to be worth the ground she gave. She still hasn't grown her hair. I hope she never does.